be specific, like to each dental office and amongst their employees. Um, but a lot of us have had to ask our employees to file for unemployment because our business depends on seeing patients every day to bring money in, and that's like the cash flow. And now
Sure.
that we can't see patients in many states, and California, I think, is mandatory shelter in. Chicago just announced it today as well, starting tomorrow. So unless there's an emergency situation, and the AD has asked us not to do any dental treatment elective unless it's an emergency procedure. So a lot of us can't carry, like we just don't have the cash flow. So we've been telling our employees to go and get unemployment or file for unemployment because they can't come to work and it's just a layoff. Um, what if there are employees that are saying, well, I don't want to file for unemployment?
I mean, nobody's required to file for unemployment. As an employer, you of course have the right to put them on an unpaid furlough if, your operations are closed down and you don't have work for them. They're certainly not required to file for unemployment, but if there's no work for them, there's no work for them. So that's kind of an individual choice. I don't think, under these circumstances, I don't really see any drawback to an employee filing for unemployment. If their employer, temporarily shuts down operations or permanently shuts down operations, if the employee is still using any paid benefits that the employer is offering, that may, reduce or limit the amount of unemployment benefits they receive. Because I think when the unemployment office does the analysis of how much they're entitled to, they do ask, are you currently receiving any other benefits from your employer? But assuming that they're not receiving any other benefits, then I don't think it hurts to apply for the unemployment. Now, from the employer perspective, one thing that you all as small business owners can consider is to apply for one of these emergency loans under the small business that the Small Business Administration is currently offering. And I believe that they're offering up to $2 million at some relatively low interest rate for small businesses to continue, to cover payroll, to pay their rent, to pay other basic bills and cover other basic needs. So, for employers that are able to get that loan, that may help them to, continue paying their employees and sort of bridge this gap if it's going to be hopefully a temporary or a short-term closure.
What does furlough mean?
Furlough is just basically like an unpaid leave of absence due to, a closure of the business.
Okay. This is a scenario that I wanted to ask you about that actually happened to my friend. She was a dentist and she practices in the Midwest, and she got a phone call from one of her patients saying that the patient is actually the one who called is a mom, and the mom brought her two daughters to the dental office about a week and a half ago for their cleanings. The mom waited in the waiting room, and the two daughters went and got their cleanings, and she called to tell the dentist that she and her husband tested positive for corona, and felt that she should tell the dentist because she was sitting in the waiting room a week and a half ago and may have exposed other patients and the dentist and the dental staff to corona. She didn't say if the girls were tested positive or not. And so if that dentist now knows about it a week and a half later, what is the obligation of the dentist, I guess, to tell the other patients or to the rest of the employees, or because now I think situations are coming out that people are getting tested and now making it aware that there's an exposure.
Sure. So, I mean, I would say that, you probably should notify your employees that may have been exposed to the extent that you're able to figure out who else may have been in the waiting room with the parents. I would probably let them know. Obviously, I wouldn't disclose any, information about the family. I wouldn't disclose, their names or any other identifying information. But I think that you probably should notify people that they may have been exposed so they can take, appropriate action, and self-quarantine or that type of thing.
So if, since, California is in the mandatory sheltering, and this might be a gray area again, because as dentists, we're still under the umbrella of healthcare, but we're not on the front lines, like you said. Are we allowed
Right.
to still send our like 1 or 2 employees to the office to answer phone calls during the day to field emergency calls? Well, but even if it's mandatory shelter?
Yeah. So last night when Governor Newsom issued the shelter-in-place order, I actually immediately pulled up the order itself, and it's actually very short and it's very broad and it's very vague, but it does allow an exemption for, essential services. And there's sort of a list of, I think it's 16 essential services, with healthcare providers sort of being one broad category in there. So my assumption is that yes, to the extent that you are still want to be open and available to provide emergency services. Obviously I would have the minimum number of people in the office necessary to be able to continue providing those services. But I would think that yes, having somebody in there to be able to answer the phones for that would be an exemption under the shelter-in-place law.
Okay, thank you. I think that people are like, how are we supposed to do this?
Now, and granted, if, I don't know if there's any way to, have calls forwarded to somebody remotely who's working at home and do it that way. I think obviously that would be ideal, but I don't know, what everybody's capabilities are. So to the extent that's not an option, I would say that yes, having, the minimum number of people in the office to be able to continue to provide emergency services would probably be fine.
Yeah, like, because one thing that scares me is allowing my employees to, as a dentist, I don't have work computers that I give to my employees to take home to work on because that's not the norm, right? So
Sure.
be nervous for them to use their personal computer to remote into my database, and then something happens and then it becomes like a HIPAA violation. Like,
Right.
I don't know if they're on a secure Wi-Fi at home. Like, I don't know all of that. So for me, it makes me feel nervous about that.
Yeah, exactly. And now probably isn't the time to be, experimenting with people using personal devices and sharing, potentially sensitive private information. So if you don't already have something like that set up, I would say, to the extent you need to or feasible, have one person in the office to answer phone calls.
Okay. Is there anything you think that we need to bring up? Or Alicia, is there anybody that wants to ask a question on the Facebook stream?
There are a lot of questions.
Maybe pick a couple, like 3.
Okay. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of questions. Are associates exempted employees?
I'm not sure what does associates mean?
So the way that dental offices are typically set up, if there's an owner doctor and then they hire doctors to work underneath them, they can either be an employee like everybody else, or they can be an independent contractor associate. But as an independent contractor, they're taking their own taxes out, etc. They're not an employee.
Right.
So Alicia, what was the question?
Right. The question is, are associates exempted employees?
Well, if they're an employee of the business, are they exempt? As in, what
are
kind
they exempt from the legislation?
I'm not sure. I'll move on to a different question. W-2 employees?
I mean, I'll answer. I'm not. If the question is, are independent contractors covered under the federal legislation? I mean, the legislation only uses the term employee. So to the extent anybody's an independent contractor, it doesn't appear that this legislation covers them. But again, we're seeing basically, new proposals being introduced every 5 minutes. So that could very easily change. And I believe that the federal government is in the process of sort of putting together some sort of economic stimulus package, which I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. So I think we all, we just need to all kind of keep tuning in and trying to figure out what new legislation is being passed.
Okay. I have another question. This one's come through a couple of times. Are they exempt if they lay off prior to the law going into effect?
So the law, this federal bill goes into effect on April 2nd. I mean, if they're laying off people prior to April 2nd and they don't have employees as of April 2nd, then yes, I mean, there's nobody to provide these benefits to if they're not employed on April 2nd.
Okay, and this law is only for full-time employees, not for temporary or on-call employees, correct?
No, I believe it applies to all employees, although the benefits, are to be provided on a sort of a pro rata basis for people who aren't working a full-time schedule.
Okay, so they have to pay hourly employees, that's correct?
They have to pay them what?
I'm not sure, we'll skip that question.
Okay.
Can I apply to unemployment if we get pay with W-2 under company S Corp, under our company S Corp?
So what that means is some of the owners themselves, will
Yeah.
put themselves as an employee under the corporation. So that corporation,
Sure.
and so then some doctors will also every 2 weeks get a paycheck as if they're
Mhm.
employed. So
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question offhand, but I would say it certainly doesn't hurt to apply. The worst that the unemployment office can tell you is no, but I would definitely, apply. And like I also said, if it may make sense for you to apply for the small business loan as well, and I would do that sooner rather than later, just because I'm sure they're getting a slew of applications.
Okay, last question. If the employees file for unemployment because of temporary closure of the office, do they lose their benefits like the health insurance that we provide?
Well, if you go on a temporary furlough, I mean, if you're formally laying them off, then in theory they would be losing their benefits and they'd be eligible to go on COBRA. If you're only going to be closed for, let's say, a few weeks, I think you probably have the option of, putting them on some sort of an unpaid leave rather than formally terminating their employment and potentially continuing their benefits through your office, if that makes sense.
Okay, great. Thank you.
all right, well,
You're
Jenna,
very welcome.
thank you so much for your time. If anyone needs to reach out to you or needs to hire for your services, how do they do so?
You can contact me by phone or email. I don't know, Dr. Young, do you have something you can post within the group with my contact information, or?
We can do that. If you can just
Okay.
email Alicia any,
Sure.
whatever contact information you want to put out there in the group, we can post that.
Sure. Okay. Sure. I'm happy to help. Let me know what I can do. Hope everybody hangs in there during this crazy time.
Thank you. You are awesome. You're very easy to understand and you break it down to our level. And so we really appreciate this 30 minutes with us to clarify information. So again, you're in San Diego.
Yep.
And are you with a firm or are you in a small firm or big firm?
So I have my own firm. As of January 1st, actually, I became a small business owner. I launched Leyton-Jones Law. So it's just me, but I provide day-to-day employment law counseling. I provide employee training and I provide workplace investigations. But, any of you small business owners that have employment law questions or needs, I'm happy to help.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
You're very welcome. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.